It's like,
I'm going to start and then break in, so you guys just go ahead and start.
Okay.
all right, are we recording now?
Have we got permission to start? You got that on the tape?
Permission to start.
Permission to start? We got some photographic technology here today. This is a high-tech version of our one in the United Kingdom. We're here in Toronto, Canada.
Oh, we're going live.
Which
We're doing
sometimes
this now.
in Canada is called the center of the universe. They want an NFL football team here.
This is how you Canadians always are. From your little perch way up north, looking down your nose with your nice red sweaters, your little cup of hot chocolate and your hockey stick in the corner,
There you go.
looking down at those Yanks.
There you go.
You're not the center of the universe.
No, that was Toronto. Like the rest of Canada is ignored. Just Toronto. And so that's the Canadian joke. But we're here in Toronto
We
at
are,
the
yes.
Alien Cosmic Expo, which you don't
Right.
like the name. Go into that a little bit.
I don't like the name.
Yeah.
I mean, it's their name. They brand it. They do what they want. We call it ACE now or they call it ACE because it Alien Cosmic Expo. It sounds a little. How do I want to put this in a nice way? It just sounds a little over the top. That's all.
Yeah.
That's fine. It is what it is.
But they got a few people here. It seems like a pretty fair attendance.
We got more than they got over at the Storm Area 51.
Yeah.
We got them beat.
Yeah, well, that's. What do you think? What do you think of that? What did you? Because what I was getting the reaction. I don't know if you know. Like, we get into the meditation stuff, and all those people came
Yes.
to me, and they wanted me to go to the Area 51 people and get big screens. They're going to do a meditation, and I'm going.
I did not know you were going to do this.
No, I said to them. I said, "Do
did
you
you?
guys want to do the meditation? You should go there." I mean, because there was all this. There was this backlash. What are these crazy people? They shouldn't be doing this. Illegal, whatever. And I'm
Right.
going like. Great. Let them do the drugs, the beer, whatever they're doing. They're raising consciousness. They got 4 million hits, and to me it was like fantastic. Whatever they want to do, and don't try to cut in. If you want to go and do meditation or whatever you want to do, you go and do it. But don't try to tell these people what to do. I mean,
This is why we love you. This is the meditation, raise consciousness. Okay, good. That works.
Oh, yeah. But I said
I didn't know that you were involved in that.
Oh, but I talked to a bunch of people, and they came to me because I had, I guess, contact through. Jeremy Corbell was in charge. They were going to
Yes.
do a band thing, and that all fell apart. They were going to do so. He was sort of helping with the band thing. So
Right.
when he answered my email,
Yes.
then they said, "Okay, tell him this. We want to do this meditation thing with the screens." And I said, "That's fine. If you guys want to do it, then don't come through me to go to Jeremy Corbell to change. These guys want to do a big tailgate
But
party."
there was
And
no
that's-
meditation, was there? Did
No.
I think there
That's what I
wasn't,
said.
no.
I mean, so they're doing a meditation this weekend, which is fine. And I said,
Okay.
whatever everybody wants to do, but to go and to tell these people who are having a tailgate party at the gate of Area 51 how they should do it or whatever, that's not their thing. And-
First, the harmonic convergence of 1987. Now this.
yeah.
So
But I think it
let's
was a
do the
big
mass
deal.
meditation.
I think it was a big deal. I mean, I was on CNN. I was watching the big CNN coverage today, and even they had on Tucker Carlson today.
This is the amazing thing that just shocks both of us is the amount of coverage, positive coverage, I mean, for the most part, that you get in the mainstream media. I did see there was a terrible article in CNN yesterday. I mean, just worst of the worst. They trotted out something that they had done 2 years earlier, repurposed it a little bit, and gave a little history of UFOs. And as you would expect, just awful, terrible, insulting, intellectually insulting history. Project Blue Book and the 701 Unidentifieds. And you just think, again, CNN. It's like CNN has become Pravda was in the old Soviet Union. They are the official mouthpiece of the establishment, and nothing good comes out of them. And it's just all this boiled down, like all the information gets boiled out, like vegetables that are just boiled for like 30 minutes too long, and then they throw that on your plate and you're supposed to eat that. That's CNN and information. And what they did with UFOs I thought was terrible. But having said that, because I just love to bash them, overall the mainstream media has done a much better job.
Do you think
covering UFOs?
My question to you would be: do you think the mainstream media needs to have the right message, or is it like I always refer back to the African American movement or the gay movement, that they did a lot of bad articles on African Americans, a lot of bad movies or whatever, but the more people talk about it, it still raises the consciousness where people are discussing it. Where
I totally agree with that.
So even though you get the CNN, they may not have the facts correct. Only you and I would really know what the real details are. That most people really don't care about the
but
facts.
in CNN's case, I mean, they're just heavy on the snark again and again. They can't. It's like they can't help themselves. But I do agree. Like the more that people are talking about it, yes, it does make a difference. And just before we went on, we were looking at your cell phone. There was you mentioned Tucker Carlson. He had Michio Kaku on yesterday, and that was interesting. Like, here you go. Michio Kaku finally come out, as it were, on the UFO issue. And he's saying it's no longer up to believers to make their case. It's now up to governments to, talk about this and say why they're not interested, or to talk about why they are interested. And I just think where we have come. So, consciousness is being raised on this issue, without a doubt.
Yeah. Even with Michio, I mean, he really doesn't know the details. He's not a researcher or whatever. And yet his name, it's almost like the Area 51 thing. It's a thing that they grab onto for a story, and they run the story.
Yeah, it's like you don't look to Michio Kaku for expertise on UFOs, but you do note what he says when he's talking about this on a national audience.
Yeah.
About, like, this matters, then you know we're in the middle of a sea change. And I'm sure you've thought about this. Like, for the last 20 years, I've asked myself, you've really got to have the culture to change before the politics changes on almost anything.
Yeah.
And, you mentioned in terms of race, in terms of sexuality, all of that, you have to have cultural changes. And now I've wondered, how long will it take before there's a cultural change in consciousness with the UFO phenomenon? And years ago, I thought, is it ever going to happen? It almost seemed like an impossibility. And I don't know that it's an impossibility anymore. I think it's becoming more and more safe for people to talk about this in ordinary situations. Not across the board. Tracy and I know of someone who's got fired. He's an astronomer and got fired just recently for talking about UFOs.
Wow.
Can you believe it? So we're still in this kind of medieval mindset in many ways, but I do think there's a cultural shift that's happening. I mean, do you agree?
Yeah, I think the New York Times is the big shift. That December 16th article. And it's sort of like the New York Times is talking about now it's for real. And what surprised me, and maybe get your reaction, when it happened, because I wrote the article called The 64 Reasons Why They Just Decided Not to Tell You the Truth. And you go back to Stephen Greer's version that the stock market's going to melt down and all this sort of stuff. And when it happened, nothing happened. Nobody jumped off a building. To me, it was kind of surprising where...
Well, it was a soft kind of a disclosure. It wasn't an official statement. It was...
But it still was. Everybody's going like, wow, it's for real type thing.
Yes.
And there was really no reaction at all. It was like, just like, sort of like... And I guess what happens, that's what I say with disclosure, is even if there's disclosure, if the government says it's for real, tomorrow, like Monday morning, people got to go to work. So it's like a high five. We have a big party. Everybody has a big party. And the next morning... I think everybody will just go back to doing what they're doing. Well, it really won't change anything.
My take on this, as of right now, so we've been in this now for almost 2 years, almost since late 2017. So I don't think that we're seeing a disclosure effort. I think what we're seeing are factions being played out behind the scenes. So I have believed for some time, and actually I'd like to know what you think about this, but I believe that, say, TTSA is not, like, they're not a government CIA control type of disclosure group. I don't believe that at all. What I do believe, though, is that they're a faction. I believe that they're a faction within the, with the intelligence group. We'll just say that in a larger sense. I mean, even though a lot of them are retired, they're still connected. I think they, basically, they're like Bigelow's club. They're the Bigelow group, and they have their own interest at stake in this, and they are pushing this with what allies they can find. So they have allies at the New York Times. They have allies in mainstream media. They don't have everyone. They also have enemies. They have enemies in the Pentagon. They have enemies in the mainstream media as well. Like, I don't think that this is a completely top-down coordinated rollout of a disclosure message. I think that they are walking a path, and in a way it's a treacherous path, but they're doing it so far pretty well, actually. They're rebranding UFOs into this mysterious UAP. We don't know what they are. Maybe they're Chinese. Maybe they're Russian. Everyone knows they're not Russian. Everyone knows they're not Chinese. But they're using this convenient fiction for a very public relations reason. And it actually is logical. Even this rollout of the idea that they're a potential threat, people make a big deal out of that. I'm not really finding that all that objectionable. I wrote 2 big fat volumes of history, UFOs and the National Security State. There's much more threat in those books than anything that they've talked about on TTSA. You have military encounters with these objects. It's been going on for generations. What's the big deal? If you're managing airspace over a base and these objects are hanging out loitering, that is a potential threat. Like, that just absolutely is. Even if they're not doing anything, you see it as a potential threat. I think that they use the phrase threat just to get people's attention, frankly. You've got a world out there that doesn't care. You got a mainstream media that doesn't care. Political group doesn't care. Academic, scientific community, they don't care about UFOs. So you have Elizondo every now and then saying, potential threat. It's like, pay attention, listen. And I think, so what I guess I'm saying is, overall, I look at the TTSA group as a faction or as a coherent group that is, for their own reasons, attempting to push a disclosure narrative. I don't know if it's a full disclosure narrative. I don't think it is. But it's, for their purposes, they're doing what they can, and they've got their allies and they've got their opponents along the way. So I think that's why, like, we're seeing some mainstream media that's jumping on board. They made it safe, and they're, from the New York Times pieces, now you got Tucker Carlson. But there's still, I think, going to be a lot of resistance.
Okay, so I would see things pretty much the opposite of that. The
Right.
way I see what the threat thing, you go back to the Obama administration, DeLong wasn't around, it was Leslie Kean and John Podesta were pushing the thing. Her big book came out, and what was she pushing? She was pushing, it was a threat to airliners, to commercial airline traffic.
Right.
And that didn't go anywhere. So what I see what they're doing, and we even heard this from Semivan, he said, when it came to the leaked documents, the Wilson document, the alien autopsy document, Melinda Leslie tells a story that she asked him, did you guys discuss it?
Right.
Yeah, we had a discussion about it. So what do you think? Oh, we're not really worried. Nobody's really that concerned about those documents. And he said the thing, if there's one line in the document, we can't talk about it. And he just said, just don't mess with the money. You can say whatever you want, think whatever you want, just don't mess with the money.
Don't mess with the money.
And that's where I see what happens is you need the disclosure, because if you want to get the money, the research money or military money, whatever, you're going to Congress. First of all, you got to get Congress to believe that UFOs are real. So you put that stuff out. You convince them, yeah, this is for real. You get a statement, get the Navy go in there and brief them, whatever. But then if it's not a threat, unless you can convince them that it's a threat, you're not going to get any money. They're just going to go, get out of here. We don't really care.
Well, so far I agree with everything that you're saying here.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that.
And so that's what I think they're doing. That's why the threat is coming in, is because you have to convince because if you convince them it's real and it's a threat, then they just say, well, how much money do you need?
Well, that's a more explicit way of saying, and I like the way you're saying it. It's like a way to get Congress's attention. But it's just using threat in general as a way of getting attention, and that's my main goal, my main point here.
But when it comes to the way I see the whole thing, and I followed the Tom DeLonge, and I had Tom DeLonge 8 months before he went public. I had him in my book, and the way he describes the stories happening is he gets the invite to Lockheed Skunk Works to introduce the president, this barbecue thing, and he goes and he makes his pitch, and his pitch was, you guys are messing it up. You don't know what you're doing. I've got this major Twitter following and, Instagram and all this sort of stuff. You aren't getting the message to the young people. You need to do it. That was his pitch when he went to Lockheed. And there was the head scientist and there was this other guy, and then Weiss came in at the very end. And then he's making the pitch, and that's when they asked him about his conspiracy website. He had that conspiracy
like a portal.
website.
Wasn't it like a conspiracy portal?
And he was putting out all these bizarre headlines about this and that. And they said, what about this crazy website you had? And he's trying to explain it. And that's when Weiss walks in the room, and they're talking to him. And then the guy says, he gives the pitch. And he
Robert
says,
Weiss, who was head of Skunk Works.
And they say, this might actually work. This is Tom DeLonge's version. He said, this might actually work. And that's when they say, we'll give you a call. And then this one gets the call to go to the two intelligence guys in Washington. So they set that up. So Tom DeLonge said he's setting them up. And I say, no, the Lockheed set up the two guys near the Pentagon that say, we're here to move the ball down the field. Then they send them to NASA. Then they send them to Ames. Then they send them to the general. And so they set up all these people as if this guy is going to help us to get whatever the message is out. And they provide all his contacts. He doesn't get the contacts. So they basically are using him. He's made the pitch, and they decided this would be a good idea to use this guy to do this thing. So when he puts out the first book in 2016 in April, that's when Jim Semivan finds out about him, and that's when he gets the call, and they put him in the hotel room in San Diego. And DeLonge says he's in this hotel room for 2 days, and these 6 intelligence guys are saying, where did you learn this from? Where did you learn that from? And that's when he says, well, his contacts and whatever, that's when Semivan takes over. Semivan says, we'll help you. And then Semivan becomes the assistant to DeLong. And you see when DeLong gets when he goes on the Rogan show and messes up, they pull him. So I say Semivan's the guy that's running the whole operation, and they have their thing. Because you come down and we can talk about the videos.
Semivan's the one who I think is always rumored to have the media connections as well.
And that's what I was told.
Yeah.
I was told before it happened that he was the guy that set up the 3 newspapers to run the same day. And we got pictures with him with the woman who ran Voice of America and stuff.
Let's just back up a little bit, because I want to go back to the Lockheed meeting and with Robert Weiss. So the way that this could be is it almost sounds like it's a Lockheed-initiated thing here to start working with Tom DeLonge.
Yeah,
Do you think so?
It helped their cause. They had some sort of thing where they realized they were trying to get some sort of message.
So where does Bigelow fit into this then? Because Bigelow, you could say, is a competitor. I mean, they would be a very small competitor to Lockheed. But when I look at the TTSA people, I'm basically seeing a group that's very close to Bigelow in many ways.
But it's all the same. It's always been the same people. Like I was talking in '89 when I first wrote the book about the Avery. And I was given the names by this Habib Azadil guy out of England, gave me the names of the Avery, and that's still the names that people use, is the names he gave me.
Right.
So these guys have always been around. It's just in the last couple of years where everybody suddenly got religious about the fact they know who Puthoff is, and Eric Davis and Green and stuff. But these guys have been around. So they were
even before they were connected with Bigelow, I realized. But since the 90s, they've all been very close to Bigelow in many ways. I mean,
but they've been close to anybody that's got money. So the way I see it is, so they went to John Alexander's group in the 1980s. Then they were in the Firmage group, because Firmage, we've got interviews with both Puthoff and Green.
Alexander didn't have any funding. He was just within the Pentagon trying to find, according to what he says.
Yeah, but he has 20 top secret SCI people in the room who have clearances, who have to get approval to do this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it was top secret restricted, because I've got the original notes from Oak Shannon, which with the cover page, which shows
Oak Shannon
appears
in the Wilson document.
And see, I always knew he was around. That's when I saw the Wilson document. I only read the first page. All I needed to see was Oak Shannon's name, because I knew he was close friends with Eric Davis, because Eric Davis gave me the Oak Shannon notes.
This is a really important point for anyone watching this. The fact that Oak Shannon, people arguing about the Wilson document, is it legit, is it not? First of all, of course it's legit. Secondly, several of the people very, very deeply involved in that have said off the record, of course it's obviously true. They've all known it's true. No one is brave enough to go on the record, but they've told me, and have they told you?
I've heard from other people that
they have told me directly, several of them. I know. I mean, it's almost comical how. But anyway, so aside from all of that, the evidence within the documents makes it obvious.
Like you and I would know the names. So when you see the documents, because when James first showed me the document, I looked at the names, and most people in the field wouldn't know those names. But when I saw the names, I go, where do you get this from? Because it's not an ordinary document. Like, I've followed these guys for years, and all these names are on this
obscure names. Exactly.
Especially Oak Shannon, because nobody knew who Oak Shannon. Now he's a big name, but nobody knew who he was.
Right.
So when I saw Oak Shannon's name, I immediately knew this is the real deal. And I said, where did you get this from? And because I was just shocked that his name was on there, and Eric Davis's notes. So that whole thing has rolled out. But it's sort of faded away. I told James that this is probably going to fade. That's the problem with ufology, is that it's like 24/7 news, or like one Trump scandal after another in the White House, where you go from one and then you forget about this one and you go on to the next one. And I remember when the documents started to fade, and then Trump goes to Korea, Korea, and he walks across the thing, and the big headline, all the UFO people are talking about, oh, there was a UFO scene when he went across the demilitarized zone, and it turned out to be birds. And I'm going, we've already gone back to the next story. It was just bizarre how it's... I
agree. I mean, the whole Wilson story has receded, but it's never going to go away. There's no way. In my view, and I think you agree...
Oh, absolutely.
Researchers who know better know that's the real deal, and it's going to be part of the received knowledge moving forward.
Yeah, and it helps us in terms of understanding that this is real material, and it's not just on the surface material.
Right.
It's the inside material where it gives you a sort of a blueprint to follow.
Absolutely. And, the other thing is that these come from the papers of Edgar Mitchell. So we have to put that out there. Mitchell dies in early 2017, January.
Yeah.
It took a year and a half, almost 2 years for them to reach you, for that one document to reach you. One of the criticisms that I heard, which I think was a very shallow criticism, frankly, was the question, well, why did it take so long? You know, you have these researchers, they've got this document, you're going to tell me that they're going to wait over a year to get the document out? And the answer is absolutely yes. People are terrified of these documents. When you got them, you were afraid of them. I got them in April of 2019, and I didn't want to be the one to leak them out.
Yeah.
And I know you didn't want to be the one. No, and the other people who had them before you
weren't even researchers.
They're not even UFO researchers, right?
Yeah.
So they don't want to be the ones to put this out there.
And James had a big company for architects.
Yes,
and he said, like, I really don't need this. And he's looking for somebody, and he'd actually talked to researchers before me, but he didn't give them the documents. They knew the documents existed.
Right.
And so he had this sort of inspiration. And the story was, I didn't even want to see the documents because Desta and I were heading to Tucson, and I said, James, I haven't got time. I got to be in Tucson. We had to be there for dinner. I said, I got to go. And then he said, I got this, and I'm into the download thing. He said, I got this idea. I woke up in the middle of the night to give you the documents. I go, really?
You're all about downloads and importing. You don't want to hear about these documents anymore. Like, you're done with the documents.
So then I said, okay, what do you got?
Right.
And then it unraveled.
Right.
And the thing is, whether he does, but he's got more. You know, I mean, I've given you some of the insights.
There's more.
And I tried to convince him, let's do
But how much more? Do you know how much more? I don't know. I mean, I have
know
a
some
general
of the details.
idea.
He's got some pretty dramatic stuff. The stuff he was offered to the other researcher before me was 2 other documents he's got. And then he said, I think we really got enough. But it's his game. So I said, okay, whatever, you know.
Right.
Or there was a letter that had nothing to do with UFOs. It was Edgar Mitchell writing a letter of condolences to a very famous person, the widow. And I said, let me drop that, because people were still going on this thing like it's not Edgar Mitchell, it was all fake.
Exactly,
and, counterintelligence, all this sort of stuff. And I'm saying, we could drop this document. There's no way people are going to say, this is
here's another one. And it's another
and it's got nothing to do with UFOs.
Correct.
But he said, I don't think so. It's too personal. So I held it back. I've got the document, but I held it back.
Right.
So it was an interesting scenario. I want to ask you about the videos in terms of this thing about, is this controlled? What's your interpretation of the video? Because the videos always to me
talking
was
about the Navy's
videos. How did they get the videos out? Because Semivan was asked, he said, of course it's green lighted from the Pentagon. So who's pulling the videos out? Because if you resign from the Pentagon in disgust or whatever the story was, they don't give you the videos when you walk away. Somebody has to, even if it's unclassified, there has to be an approval paper pad to get the videos.
The thing is,
out.
I don't think there's not a public explanation of how those videos were released. So that's the one thing. One thing that has to be said is that the first of them, the so-called Tic Tac UFO video, did briefly make it in 2007 to above top secret.
Exactly.
So that was out there, and there was a long discussion about it. I believe Isaac Coy, one of the researchers there at the time, put out an explanation, an argument that these were created by German film students. And this was, and I mean, I'm not criticizing that explanation, but I don't think that's the true explanation. No. But it was out in 2007 for a little while, and then I don't know how it was pulled, but it ended up not being there after a while. So it got out.
Yeah.
Years go by. The Tic Tac case was written about on Fighter Sweep by a friend of David Fravor named Paco Cherio. I don't know how many years before the TTSA, but a couple of years before, I think. So the question, the video had been out already, and the official thing is that they were not classified; they were unclassified, but nonetheless, for the public to have those videos, they had to be cleared by some kind of process. I don't know exactly the details, but somehow they had to be cleared, and the Navy has claimed that these were not cleared. That leads to speculation that there's some kind of deep CIA machination or something else going on. I would just as soon assume that whether it's Semivan or someone else within that team had friends within the Pentagon and got it done. But I don't know how they got it done. I don't know how these were cleared, but they seem to have been cleared legally. I don't think there's any, other than the Navy's claim it was done without being cleared, but even the Navy didn't say that it was illegal. I haven't heard anything to that effect.
One of the things, I don't know if you've discussed it, the Melon Leak. Are you familiar with the Melon Leak, where supposedly this documents, Twitter Jay gets them, he goes to Melon's website, and all these documents and photos are on there. And then he posts them on Twitter, and I'm trying to get them. And that was the Lou Elizondo resignation letter.
Oh, right, okay.
All this sort of stuff. And one of the things they had...
I haven't seen any of these.
Yeah, and so the question there again was, why did Melon have this stuff on his website? It was almost like a leak. And TTSA was saying, his website got hacked. And I'm going, come on. It was like almost intentional. And the problem was when they gave them to me, I said, there's going to be problems with every document. And when they sent me the Lou Elizondo thing, I went, hasn't got a date on it. I mean, how do you resign without a date on it? But one of the things that they did have was they had a photograph of 4 DVDs and a package. I guess it's a carrier package for these DVDs. And it's got Chris Mellon, Lou Elizondo, and it's got this name. And I actually went through a source I have at the Pentagon.
Yeah.
And we actually have the woman's name. It's a woman. And the name is escaping me right now. But when I was told, the person who gave it to me said, this would be a person in public affairs. So what they're showing is these DVDs and the package as it moves, like the sort of the mailing package, and has this woman's name, which is a very weird name. So when it came, it was like the guy that phoned me. It was actually, I think, the same guy who put the documents out, that sent you a document, sent all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
He phoned me and he said, we're talking on the phone. He says, I think we got a direct hit. And I go, what? And it was this woman's name. Because I said, because if you look on this photograph that was leaked on Melon's site, it has this, I can't remember the name. It was a D, just had the first initial. So I said, can you see if your Pentagon guy, whether they can get this? And the next morning I'm talking to him, he said, I think we got a direct hit. And he said, this person would be in there. So it goes one step farther that this is where the videos were coming. This is sort of
I see.
the thing.
This is how the videos were cleared for release.
That it was coming from public affairs, but it still doesn't say who was the actual person who greenlighted it. It just puts this other woman in the chain of command that she gives them to Elizondo, who mails them to Melon, and then Melon puts these things on his website, and they suddenly get out into the open, and they say, somebody hacked the website. We didn't intend. And they were saying
that's a very clever way to do this.
Yeah.
That's a very sly,
and you're mentioning
clever,
this thing that the videos, and I'll tell you a story.
But this makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Like, in other words,
it's plausible deniability.
It's also not technically illegal. They were able to get this cleared, and they were able to make it so that the Navy essentially would have to throw up their hands and say, nothing we can do about this, so we're not going to fight it.
And the one thing you brought up was interesting because I've been following these Avery guys for many decades. When it came out, I knew, as soon as I saw Eric Davis's thing and the thing about the alien autopsy, that I immediately knew that this was Edgar Mitchell sitting on the board of NIDS.
Yeah.
And that all these guys were in NIDS. They were all in the Bigelow thing.
Yes,
Bigelow
absolutely.
was paying them lots of money,
Yes.
and Kit Green was running the board at one time.
He was the chair, of the board,
And so I knew this. So when I saw that, I remember immediately, because people say, well, why would they do this? Why would Bigelow? And I knew because they had come to me in the early, when just after.
People are wondering why Bigelow would preside over that? Or
Why he'd be doing this kind of stuff. But they came to me about the Holloman Air Force Base film. So they did a lot of stuff. So they did the alien autopsy, they did Skinwalker Ranch, so they're looking at all these things. So Bigelow's got the money, almost like Rockefeller.
Yeah, exactly.
And he brings in these guys, and
Yeah.
if you're paying them $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a day, they got to produce something. So you bring the top guys, all these Avery guys who have been rumored to be around, they come in. So they came to me about the Holloman Air Force Base film, because I'd worked with Bob Emenegger on the whole film. And so,
if you're just tuning in and you don't know what we're talking about, you're going to have to go back and get a heck of an education on this, because Grant's just racing ahead.
Yeah, no, but it's
fascinating.
So
stuff.
it's just another subject that we're doing. It was the Holloman Air Force Base
Right.
film, which is rumored to be a film where the aliens land and there's 4 cameras filming it.
1964,
Well, 71. There's
the
Emenegger
64
uses
and the
71,
correct. Yeah.
Doty uses 64. So you put these 2 different dates out, the same thing, to cause confusion.
Well, I think there was a 64 landing, personally.
Yeah, but Emenegger told me it was 70. He had all these details. 6 o'clock in the morning, 4 cameras. He had all the stuff. He knew exactly which hangars there was. They gave a lot of details. So I sort of it doesn't really matter what the date was.
Yeah, right.
But anyway, so they came to me, and
I think it does.
And
Anyway.
Hal contacted me, and Eric contacted me. What did you talk about? And they wanted to know all the details I knew, because
They were interested in your take on the Holloman Air Force landing.
NIDS was working on the Holloman Air, and they were trying to contact presidents. They were trying to contact, because it was always rumored to be a part of the briefing for the President of the United States. So they were checking that. So they came to me. You worked on the Holloman. What did you find out? And this sort of stuff. And Senator Christopher Dodd had filed an FOIA. Hal was tracking that back. And they actually had Paul Shartle, who was the security manager, who actually, with Bob Emenegger and Sandler, was the guy who said to them, "We'd like you to do this documentary." And he's the guy that went on UFO Cover-Up Live in 1988 and said, "I saw the film, and this is what was on the film." Everybody else claimed they didn't see the film. But he went, and they were actually bringing him to Las Vegas to interview him.
Yes.
NIDS was doing it. And he had a rollover car accident like 2 weeks before this event.
Paul Shartle?
Paul Shartle. And so I knew they were working on this. So I knew, and the other thing I knew was they indicated, I can't remember who it was, indicated to me that the Holloman Air Force Base film was not classified. And I've started to look at it, and I think that maybe all the films are not classified. It's this idea that if you move it into private industry, or if you don't classify it, because if you classify it, then you got a 25-year rule that you have to declassify it. You got to go through all that.
Yeah, you can keep things way better hidden sometimes if they're not classified, because there's this massive. Because to find them, you'd have to know exactly where to look.
Yeah. So when TTSA said they weren't classified, I'm thinking back, oh, that's what I heard about the Holloman film, too. And I'm thinking,
that's
maybe
a really
this
interesting
is part
point.
Of the process. So I knew that the NIDS people were doing it. So to me, it was not unusual.
The thing about NIDS and Bigelow and Puthoff and Green and Davis, and we'll toss in Colm Kelleher, and we'll toss in anyone else associated, Edgar Mitchell. These are people who have spent their lives trying to get to the center of that maze.
Yeah.
They want to get to the Holy Grail. They want to know the full truth about They've all got different levels of security clearances. They all know certain things. They all know a lot.
They all have a piece. They have a piece.
They all have a piece, and you have to assume that they share with each other the things
because
they
can
feel
trust
they
each
can.
other. Because they're
exactly.
Yeah.
So they know a lot, but they want more because they've got the bug. They need to get this. So I think that's what's been going all along. And when I see them, basically, this is the old aviary group. Now it's rebooted as TTSA, and they're still doing this. This is still. That's why I see them as a group or as a faction, not as a controlled CIA operation. Or anything like that.
Wherever there's money, that's what I found. So they go from Bill Moore to John Alexander to Firmage to Bob Bigelow, and it's where's the money? Where's the information?
Exactly.
So
follow the money.
And that's what they had said. That is how Jim Semivan describes.
Don't get in the way of the money.
Well, but he describes the fact that it was Kit Green who said, "Have you heard about this guy?" That's where he got the alert. Kit Green notified Semivan that this guy had these contacts, and that's why Semivan got involved.
You're talking about
DeLong.
This guy had contacts.
And so to me, they're like guys who collect wild game animals or whatever. They've got or like when Kit Green was talking about that Kit Green couldn't get briefed into the alien autopsy program. So